La viuda apache paralizzata fu abandonada, hasta un ranchero cambió su destino. She had always been known in her small Apache community as a woman of strength and warmth. Her days were filled with simple but meaningful routines, preparing meals for her family, tending to the small garden behind her home, and caring for her children with a love that seemed endless. Everyone admired her resilience and the way she handled life's challenges with grace, but nothing could have prepared her for the tragedy that would change everything. It was an ordinary morning when the accident happened. The sun had just begun to climb in the sky, casting a golden light over the arid landscape. She was walking along the dusty path near her home, carrying a small bundle of firewood. Her mind wandered to thoughts of her late husband, who had passed a few years earlier. Though she had mourned deeply, she had found a way to move forward, to care for her family and keep life as normal as possible. But that morning, a misstep on the uneven ground caused her to fall hard. At first, she thought it was just pain in her leg or back, something that would fade with time. But when she tried to stand and could not, fear gripped her heart. She felt a cold, heavy weight in her body, a realization that sent shivers down her spine. She could not move her legs. Panic set in as she tried again and again, but nothing happened. She was paralyzed, unable to rise, unable to call for help loudly enough for anyone to hear. Hours passed before a neighbor noticed her absence and came to check on her. The journey to the nearest town for treatment was long and painful, and the diagnosis confirmed her deepest fear. She would never walk again. The news hit her like a storm. The life she had built, the independence she had cherished, now seemed like a distant memory. Her home, once a place of warmth and laughter, became a prison of her own body. Every corner reminded her of what she could no longer do. The garden she loved so much required strength she no longer possessed. The chores that had once given her a sense of purpose now became sources of frustration and helplessness. Worse than the physical pain was the isolation. She had always been surrounded by friends and family, people who valued her presence. But soon, the whispers began. Relatives, once caring and involved, started visiting less frequently. Some offered help at first but gradually disappeared, claiming they were too busy or that caring for her was too difficult. Neighbors who once exchanged friendly greetings avoided her gaze, unsure how to act around someone who could no longer manage her daily life. One by one, the people she had trusted and loved drifted away. At night, when the world outside her home grew quiet, the loneliness became almost unbearable. She would sit by the window, staring at the stars, remembering the times when her children laughed and played, when neighbors knocked on the door to share food or news, when her husband's voice filled the rooms with warmth. Those moments now felt like memories from another life, unreachable and fading. The silence around her was a sharp contrast to the vibrant life she had once known. Despite her despair, there was a part of her that refused to give up completely. Deep inside, a small flame of resilience burned. She began to notice tiny ways she could still manage life. With the help of a few adaptive tools she had learned about from pamphlets and visitors, she found ways to feed herself, adjust her seating, and manage basic hygiene. Every small success brought a mixture of relief and sorrow, the relief of independence and the sorrow that these were now her greatest victories. Her children, young but deeply devoted, became her lifeline. They would visit as often as they could, bringing stories from school, helping with meals, and sitting by her side to keep her company. Their presence was a reminder that she was not completely alone, even as the rest of the world seemed to have turned away. She cherished these moments, knowing that each visit was a gift, a fragile connection to the life she had once known. Yet, the community's attitude weighed heavily on her spirit. People's avoidance, the subtle glances of pity, and the whispered conversations outside her door reminded her every day that she had been marked as someone different, someone burdensome. It was a bitter reality, one she could not change, no matter how strong her heart remained. She began to understand the true depth of human indifference, how quickly people could withdraw support when circumstances became inconvenient. She spent many hours reflecting on her situation. Sitting by the window, she watched the seasons change. The dry winds of autumn gave way to the cold grip of winter, then the soft warmth of spring returned. Life outside continued unabated, children grew, families celebrated, neighbors worked, but inside her home, time seemed frozen. She was trapped in her body, in her grief, in the echoing silence of abandonment. During these quiet moments, she also recalled her husband's words. Strength was not just in the body but in the heart and mind. Those memories became her anchor. She reminded herself that her life still had meaning, even if it looked very different from before. She could still care for her children, still tell stories, still find joy in small moments. And perhaps, she thought, even in her paralysis, there might be someone who would see her not as a burden, but as a person worthy of respect and kindness. One afternoon, as she adjusted herself in her wheelchair, trying to reach the small stack of books she had kept on a shelf, she noticed a figure approaching from the distant trail. It was rare for anyone to come this far, and a sense of cautious curiosity filled her. Who could it be? A neighbor checking in, a distant relative, or perhaps just a traveler passing through? She could not know yet, but there was something about the figure's calm pace, the way he moved deliberately and without hurry, that made her heart beat with a small flicker of hope. The figure was a ranchero, a man known in nearby areas for his honesty, his work ethic, and his quiet generosity. He carried a bundle of supplies and moved as if he had no particular destination, yet something drew him to her home. As he approached, she felt a mix of fear and anticipation. Years of abandonment had taught her to be wary of others' intentions, but there was also a deep longing for connection that made her hope he was different. When he finally reached her doorstep, he greeted her with a respectful nod, introducing himself simply and kindly. Unlike others who had offered fleeting sympathy, his words had a weight of sincerity. He did not look at her with pity, nor did he act uncomfortable. Instead, he seemed genuinely interested in her well-being, as if her paralysis did not define her at all. That first encounter was brief but significant. He offered to help her with a simple task, adjusting her chair so she could reach the window more comfortably. She hesitated, unsure whether to trust him, but when he gently assisted her, careful not to rush or overwhelm, she realized that perhaps there were still people in the world who could see beyond her disability, who could value her as she was. As he left, he promised to return, not as a savior but as a friend willing to help when needed. For the first time in many months, she felt a sense of cautious optimism. Perhaps her story was not over. Perhaps, despite the tragedy, despite the abandonment, life still had moments of kindness and connection waiting for her. That evening, as she watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, she allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. The world was still full of challenges, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of hope. Somewhere beyond her window, beyond the walls that had confined her, someone had chosen to see her as a person again. And for the first time since her life had changed, she began to believe that her journey might yet take a turn toward something brighter. Days passed after the ranchero's first visit, and life slowly began to shift for her. The little spark of hope she had felt lingered, growing quietly but steadily. She found herself thinking about the man who had come to her doorstep, wondering why someone she did not know would show kindness without expecting anything in return. It was a foreign feeling, one she had almost forgotten existed amid months of isolation and abandonment. Her daily routine remained challenging. The paralysis still made every movement difficult, every task exhausting. Simple chores like preparing a meal or adjusting her blanket required careful planning and effort. Some days, pain and fatigue overwhelmed her, and she would spend hours staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of her body and the loneliness pressing in from all sides. But even on those difficult days, thoughts of the ranchero and his gentle manner gave her comfort. For the first time, she felt as though someone truly cared, not out of obligation, but out of genuine concern for her well-being. She began to notice the small victories in her daily life. With careful practice, she learned to move herself slightly in the wheelchair, to reach objects that had seemed forever out of reach, and to manage basic personal tasks independently. Each tiny accomplishment brought a mix of pride and relief. They reminded her that, despite everything, she still had control over some aspects of her life. It was a slow, painstaking process, but each step made her feel a little more human again, a little less trapped by her circumstances. The ranchero returned as promised, his visits becoming more regular over time. He did not come with grand gestures or dramatic plans. Instead, he arrived with simple, practical help. Sometimes he brought food or water, other times he helped with small repairs around her home. But it was not just the help itself that mattered. It was the way he treated her, with patience and respect, as an equal rather than a person to be pitied. His presence became a steady rhythm in her life, a reminder that someone outside her family still cared. Their conversations began slowly. At first, they were brief, polite exchanges about the weather, her needs, or the condition of her home. But gradually, she opened up about her life, her memories of her husband, the struggles she faced each day, and the quiet despair of being abandoned by those she had once loved. He listened without judgment, nodding and responding with thoughtful words that made her feel heard and understood. For the first time in months, she felt a connection that was not defined by her disability, a human bond that restored a small piece of her dignity. Despite these comforting moments, the reality of her isolation still weighed heavily. The community, though aware of her condition, remained distant. Children ran past her home without stopping to say hello. Neighbors exchanged glances but avoided conversations, and relatives offered only rare visits, each shorter than the last. She felt the sting of abandonment every day, a reminder of how fragile human relationships could be when circumstances changed. But even in this difficult environment, she began to notice something important: her own strength. She started to rely more on her inner resources, finding ways to occupy her mind and spirit. Reading became a refuge, allowing her to travel in her imagination to places she could no longer physically reach. Writing small notes and letters, even if she could not always send them, gave her a sense of purpose and expression. She discovered that though her body was limited, her mind remained free, and in that freedom, she found a measure of comfort and control. One afternoon, as she tried to reach a jar of herbs from the top shelf, the ranchero appeared again. Seeing her struggle, he stepped forward to help, but he also encouraged her to try moving it herself first, guiding her gently without taking over. This careful balance of support and independence became the cornerstone of their growing relationship. She realized that he did not want to make her dependent on him. He wanted to help her regain as much autonomy as possible. It was a delicate, powerful lesson in trust and dignity. Their bond deepened over time. They began sharing stories of their lives, their childhoods, and the experiences that had shaped them. She learned about his years working on the ranch, his respect for nature and the values that guided him. He, in turn, learned about her life before the accident, the love she had for her family, and the hardships she had endured. These stories became threads connecting them, weaving a tapestry of mutual understanding and respect. They laughed together over small anecdotes, shared quiet moments of reflection, and slowly, a profound friendship began to take root. The ranchero also helped her reconnect with her surroundings in small ways. He encouraged her to watch the changing seasons, notice the colors of the sky at different times of day, and listened to the sounds of birds and wind. He brought flowers and small plants for her home, helping her tend them from her wheelchair. These acts, seemingly simple, were transformative. They reminded her that life still held beauty and that she could participate in it, even from a limited physical perspective. Her children noticed the change as well. They saw their mother's spirit lift, her eyes brighter, and her conversations more animated. The ranchero treated them with kindness, never interfering but always present to offer guidance or assistance when needed. Slowly, a sense of normalcy returned to the household. The home, once filled with silence and tension, now carried warmth and hope. She realized that support did not erase her struggles, but it made them bearable, giving her a chance to rebuild her life step by step. Yet the journey was not without setbacks. Some days, pain overwhelmed her. Fatigue left her unable to do even the smallest tasks. On these days, the frustration and sorrow threatened to pull her back into despair. But the ranchero's steady presence and gentle encouragement reminded her that setbacks were part of the process, not a sign of failure. He helped her focus on what she could do, rather than what she could not, teaching her patience and resilience. Over time, she began to internalize these lessons, finding ways to motivate herself even when no one was around. The relationship between them, though still defined by support and care, began to take on deeper layers of trust. She learned to share her fears openly, to ask for help without shame, and to accept kindness without guilt. He, in turn, respected her boundaries, offering assistance when asked and space when needed. This balance created a safe environment in which she could begin to heal emotionally, a rare and precious gift after months of abandonment. In quiet moments, she reflected on the contrast between the community's indifference and the ranchero's compassion. She realized that true human connection was not always found among neighbors or relatives, but sometimes in unexpected places and people. This realization gave her hope that the world still contained goodness, even when life seemed unfair. She understood that while her paralysis had taken much from her, it had not taken her spirit, nor her ability to recognize kindness when it appeared. As the weeks turned into months, she began to plan for small steps forward. She practiced using adaptive tools more efficiently, learned new ways to manage her home, and found creative ways to participate in daily activities. Each success reinforced her confidence and reminded her that, though life had changed, it was not over. With the ranchero's continued support and her own determination, she felt a growing sense of possibility. By the end of this period, she was no longer simply surviving. She was learning to live, to find joy and purpose despite the limitations imposed by her paralysis. The ranchero's consistent presence had shown her that human kindness could transform despair into hope, and her own inner resilience had shown her that she could rise above isolation. Together, they had begun a journey not only of physical support, but of emotional healing, creating a foundation for a future that once seemed impossible. In these moments of growth, she realized something profound. Life, even after tragedy and abandonment, could still offer connection, hope, and a chance to reclaim dignity. The experience had taught her that strength was not measured by physical ability alone, but by the courage to continue, the willingness to trust again, and the capacity to embrace help without shame. And in that realization, a small but powerful flame of hope burned brighter than ever, lighting a path toward the next chapter of her life. The ranchero's visits became a regular part of her life, and with each encounter, the distance between them slowly disappeared. He was no longer just a kind stranger, but someone who had begun to understand the depths of her struggles and the strength that lay hidden beneath them. She found herself anticipating his visits, not merely for the practical help he offered, but for the conversations and quiet companionship that seemed to breathe life back into her days. He had a way of noticing small details that others overlooked. He observed how her eyes would brighten when she spoke about her garden, or how her hands trembled slightly when reaching for objects out of her grasp. His attentiveness was gentle, never intrusive, but it showed her that someone cared deeply about her well-being. She realized that she was no longer invisible. Someone saw her as she truly was, not defined by her paralysis, but by her thoughts, her memories, and her enduring spirit. Their conversations grew richer, moving from practical matters to shared experiences, stories of the past, and dreams for the future. She spoke of her childhood in the Apache community, of the lessons her parents had taught her, and of the love she had shared with her late husband. The ranchero listened with a quiet intensity, never interrupting, always allowing her to speak her heart. In return, he shared fragments of his own life, the long hours on the ranch, the challenges he faced, and the simple joys he found in working the land. These exchanges, filled with honesty and warmth, slowly built a bridge of trust between them. At first, she was hesitant to accept help beyond what was necessary. Months of abandonment had taught her to be wary of kindness, fearing that it was temporary or conditional. But the ranchero's consistency gradually broke down those walls. He never imposed himself, never demanded gratitude, and never expected anything in return. Instead, he offered his presence, his patience, and his respect, and in doing so, he created a space where she felt safe to rely on someone again. One morning, he arrived with a small wooden stool, explaining that it could help her reach items that were otherwise difficult to access. At first, she was reluctant, unsure if she could manage it. But he encouraged her gently, guiding her hands and showing her the careful movements needed. After several tries, she succeeded in placing the stool under her arm and using it to reach a small basket of herbs she had longed to touch. The victory was modest but profound. It was a reminder that even small steps could lead to empowerment, and that support did not mean dependence. Over time, their relationship grew to include moments of shared laughter and simple pleasures. The ranchero brought news from the town, stories of neighbors, and occasional treats for her children. They would spend afternoons talking while she tended her small indoor garden, him sitting nearby, offering guidance without taking over. These moments became treasures in her daily life, each one reinforcing the idea that life, despite its challenges, could still hold joy and connection. The community began to notice subtle changes as well. Some neighbors who had once avoided her home saw the ranchero's visits and were reminded that she was not completely alone. While many remained distant, a few began offering occasional help, inspired by the quiet determination and courage she displayed. Though she did not rely on this attention, it brought a small sense of validation, a reminder that perseverance and dignity could slowly shift perceptions. Her children observed her growing confidence and resilience with admiration. They noticed how she smiled more often, how her laughter returned to the home, and how she engaged more actively in small tasks. The ranchero treated them with kindness and respect, never overstepping but always present to assist when necessary. Through his actions, they learned the importance of empathy and support, witnessing firsthand how simple, consistent care could transform a life. Despite the progress, there were still difficult moments. Pain and fatigue were constant companions, and there were days when despair threatened to pull her back into the shadows. On such days, the ranchero's presence was a lifeline. He would sit quietly beside her, offering words of encouragement or simply holding space for her emotions. He never rushed her healing, never demanded that she hide her struggles, and never treated her vulnerability as weakness. These gestures, small but profound, strengthened her trust and deepened their bond. The turning point came one late afternoon when a sudden storm swept through the region. Strong winds rattled the windows, and the rain poured in heavy sheets. She struggled to secure her home, feeling vulnerable and exposed. Just then, a familiar figure appeared at her doorstep, the ranchero, drenched but determined, carrying supplies to help protect her home. He worked alongside her, securing windows, moving furniture, and offering reassuring words. She realized in that moment that his commitment was more than casual kindness. It was a steadfast presence, someone willing to face challenges alongside her. After the storm passed, they sat together, listening to the rain tapping on the roof and sharing a quiet meal. She spoke of her fears, the months of isolation, and the deep longing for connection. He listened with patience, validating her emotions and offering gentle wisdom. That evening, she felt a profound shift within herself. For the first time in many months, she felt a sense of security and hope that was not fleeting. She understood that while her body remained limited, her spirit could thrive with support, trust, and companionship. The ranchero also encouraged her to explore activities that nurtured her mind and creativity. They began working together on simple projects, arranging plants, writing notes to friends, and crafting small household items. These endeavors were not just tasks. They became expressions of her independence and resilience. She discovered that even in her paralysis, she could create, contribute, and find fulfillment. The ranchero's encouragement reinforced her confidence, showing her that capability was not defined solely by physical strength, but by determination and ingenuity. As the weeks turned into months, a new rhythm settled into her life. She rose each morning with a renewed sense of purpose, looked forward to the ranchero's visits, and engaged in daily routines with greater confidence. The home that had once been a place of despair became a space of quiet joy and possibility. Each day, she discovered more about her own resilience, the kindness of others, and the unexpected beauty of human connection. Their bond, though still carefully measured, began to include deeper emotional intimacy. She found herself sharing thoughts and memories she had kept hidden, revealing the vulnerabilities that had long been buried under fear and pain. The ranchero responded with empathy and understanding, never judging, never pressuring, simply offering a safe space for her to express herself. This trust became the foundation of a relationship that went beyond assistance. It became a partnership of hearts, grounded in respect, care, and mutual understanding. One afternoon, as the sun set in hues of orange and pink, they sat together outside her home. She shared stories of her ancestors, tales of Apache resilience, and the lessons she had learned from a lifetime of challenges. He listened intently, asking questions, learning, and reflecting. She realized that in sharing her past and wisdom, she was reclaiming her voice, asserting her identity beyond her physical limitations. And in listening, he was offering recognition and respect, validating her experiences and her existence. Through these experiences, she began to notice subtle changes in herself. She felt stronger emotionally, more confident in her ability to navigate daily challenges, and more open to the possibilities that life might offer. She understood that while her body had limits, her mind and heart could still expand, grow, and connect with the world around her. The ranchero's presence had not just provided practical help, it had reignited her spirit, reminding her that she was still capable of experiencing joy, trust, and meaningful human connection. By the end of this chapter in her life, she had reached a significant turning point. The despair that had once dominated her days had begun to give way to hope. The isolation she had endured was being replaced with companionship and trust. And most importantly, she realized that her life was not defined by her paralysis, but by her resilience, her courage, and the willingness of someone to see her as a person worthy of respect and kindness. In these quiet, transformative months, she began to believe that her story was far from over. The ranchero's steady presence, their growing friendship, and the small victories she achieved each day were proof that even after tragedy and abandonment, life could still offer connection, hope, and a chance to rebuild. She no longer saw herself solely as a victim of circumstance, but as a woman capable of reclaiming her dignity, finding joy in small moments, and embracing the kindness of those who genuinely cared. And so, as the sun disappeared below the horizon and the first stars appeared in the night sky, she felt a sense of quiet anticipation. Life had begun to shift in ways she had never imagined. The path ahead was still uncertain, and challenges remained, but for the first time in a long while, she faced the future not with fear but with hope. The ranchero had entered her life unexpectedly, yet profoundly, and together they had begun a journey of healing, trust, and the possibility of something beautiful that neither of them had anticipated. Life began to take on a new rhythm for her, one that balanced independence with the quiet, steady support of the ranchero. She had spent months learning to navigate her home and manage daily tasks with greater confidence, and now she began to notice that she could do more than she had imagined. The paralysis still limited her body, but her spirit was growing stronger, and the combination of determination and guidance allowed her to rediscover a sense of purpose. One morning, she decided to attempt a small but meaningful project, tending her outdoor garden. The plants had been neglected for months, and the soil had hardened under the sun. The idea of revitalizing it felt overwhelming, yet exciting. The ranchero arrived as usual, noticing her focus and determination. Without rushing her or taking over, he helped by bringing lightweight tools, watering cans, and a few young plants. He guided her gently on how to position the tools so she could manage them from her wheelchair. With patience, he offered advice but never completed the work for her. She felt a spark of accomplishment as she planted the first seeds and watered the garden. The sensation of soil in her hands, the smell of earth after months of neglect, and the small shoots of new life rising from the ground brought a joy she had thought lost forever. Each task in the garden became an exercise in determination, problem-solving, and creativity. She learned how to arrange the plants to reach them comfortably, how to water them without straining, and how to prune and care for them with precision. Slowly, the garden transformed into a place of beauty and pride, a reflection of her own resilience. Her children watched with admiration as their mother worked tirelessly. They saw the light return to her eyes, the strength in her hands, and the smile that grew more frequent with each passing day. They began to help in small ways, handing her tools, carrying water, and even planting their own small sections. This shared effort brought the family closer, creating moments of laughter, learning, and connection that had been missing for so long. The garden became a symbol of renewal, not just for the plants, but for the life she was rebuilding. The ranchero continued to offer support, but his approach was always measured, encouraging her independence. He suggested creative solutions for daily challenges, such as building small ramps for easier access to certain areas, using adaptive tools for cooking, and creating a system to organize her belongings for easier reach. Each suggestion was a small gift of empowerment, allowing her to regain control over aspects of life she had thought were lost. With each success, her confidence grew, reinforcing the belief that she could continue to adapt and thrive. Her health, both physical and emotional, began to improve as well. Regular visits from the ranchero included not only practical assistance, but also guidance on exercises that could help maintain strength and flexibility in her upper body. She worked diligently, motivated by the desire to reclaim as much independence as possible. Over time, she noticed small but meaningful changes, less fatigue, improved posture, and a greater sense of energy. These improvements allowed her to engage more fully in daily tasks and activities, further boosting her confidence and morale. Beyond physical recovery, her emotional world continued to expand. The ranchero's presence had created a safe space for her to express feelings she had long suppressed: grief, frustration, fear, and longing. She learned that vulnerability was not a weakness, but a bridge to deeper understanding and trust. Through their conversations, she began to process the pain of abandonment, recognizing that the absence of others did not diminish her worth. Instead, it revealed the value of those who stayed and supported her unconditionally. Her community, slowly observing the changes in her, began to shift in perception as well. A few neighbors who had once been distant approached with cautious friendliness, offering help or sharing news from town. Though some skepticism remained, these gestures reminded her that courage and resilience could inspire others. She did not seek approval, but the acknowledgement of her strength and determination reinforced her sense of self-worth. The contrast between those who abandoned her and those who supported her underscored a powerful lesson. Character and kindness are revealed in times of adversity. The relationship between her and the ranchero deepened in a natural, unspoken way. Trust, respect, and mutual admiration became the foundation of a bond that transcended simple assistance. They shared quiet moments in the garden, sat together watching the sunset, and exchanged stories and dreams. He continued to treat her as an equal, honoring her opinions and celebrating her accomplishments. She realized that this partnership was more than practical support. It was a relationship built on genuine care, respect, and understanding. One day, inspired by her progress, she decided to write letters to other women in her community who faced challenges of their own. She shared her experiences, the lessons she had learned, and the hope that even in difficult circumstances, life could hold moments of beauty and possibility. With the ranchero's help, she sent these letters, not expecting recognition, but hoping to extend the kindness and encouragement she had received. The act of reaching out gave her a sense of purpose and fulfillment, reinforcing the idea that her life could impact others positively. The ranchero also encouraged her to participate in small community events. At first, she hesitated, worried about how others would perceive her. But he reminded her that her worth was not defined by others' opinions. With careful planning and support, she attended gatherings, sharing stories and laughter with those willing to listen. Each event strengthened her confidence, proving that even after tragedy, she could reclaim a meaningful place in the world. Her children, inspired by her perseverance, took on responsibilities with renewed enthusiasm. They helped care for the garden, assisted with household tasks, and joined her in small community activities. Together, they created a sense of normalcy and joy that had been absent for months. The family, once fractured by tragedy and isolation, was gradually becoming whole again, each member contributing to a shared sense of hope and resilience. As the seasons changed, so did her home and life. The garden flourished under her care, a vivid testament to her determination and growth. Her skills in managing her home improved daily, and her confidence in her abilities expanded. The ranchero's guidance remained steady but unobtrusive, allowing her to take the lead in her own recovery. Together, they navigated challenges, celebrated victories, and learned from setbacks, creating a rhythm of life that balanced independence, support, and shared joy. One particularly memorable afternoon, she managed to organize a small harvest from her garden. The vegetables and herbs she had nurtured for months were ready, and the sense of accomplishment was overwhelming. She prepared a simple meal for herself and her children, savoring the fruits of her labor. The ranchero, observing quietly, offered praise and encouragement, celebrating her initiative and skill. In that moment, she felt a profound sense of empowerment, a realization that she could shape her life and surroundings, even within the limits imposed by her body. Her emotional growth continued to unfold as well. She began to forgive the people who had abandoned her, understanding that their absence reflected their limitations rather than her worth. This act of forgiveness brought a sense of peace, freeing her from the burden of resentment. She realized that her strength was not just in enduring hardship, but in cultivating compassion, resilience, and gratitude for those who had stood by her. Through these experiences, she discovered a profound truth. Life's value is not measured solely by physical ability, social acceptance, or external circumstances, but by the courage to persevere, the willingness to adapt, and the capacity to recognize and embrace kindness. Her journey from despair to empowerment became a testament to the human spirit's ability to overcome adversity when supported by trust, patience, and genuine care. By the end of this transformative period, she had achieved remarkable growth. She was more independent, emotionally resilient, and confident in her abilities. Her garden flourished, her home functioned efficiently, and her relationship with the ranchero had deepened into one of mutual respect and understanding. The children thrived in the supportive environment she nurtured, and the community began to recognize her strength and determination. In these months, she had reclaimed her dignity, learned to trust again, and discovered a renewed sense of purpose. The life that had once seemed limited by tragedy and abandonment now held possibility, joy, and connection. She understood that challenges would continue, but she also knew that she possessed the strength, resources, and support to face them. As she watched the sunset one evening, the garden glowing in the soft light, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Life had changed in ways she had never imagined, yet she had grown stronger, more confident, and more hopeful. The ranchero's steady presence had not only provided assistance, but had illuminated the path toward independence and self-discovery. Together, they had transformed her life, proving that compassion, determination, and trust could turn despair into opportunity. With each passing day, she became more certain that her story was far from over. The paralysis that had once defined her existence no longer held absolute power over her life. She had reclaimed her agency, nurtured her spirit, and built meaningful connections. The garden, the home, the children, and the ranchero's unwavering support, all were symbols of her journey from isolation to empowerment. She had learned that even after the darkest storms, life could bloom again, vibrant and full of promise. The months had passed, and her life had transformed in ways she had never thought possible. What had once been a home of silence and sorrow was now filled with light, activity, and warmth. Her garden flourished with colorful flowers and vibrant vegetables, a living testament to her determination and resilience. She moved with greater ease in her wheelchair, confident in her ability to manage daily life, and her children thrived in the renewed environment she had nurtured. The ranchero remained a steadfast presence, supporting her not by taking over her life, but by walking alongside her. Their bond had deepened into a profound partnership built on mutual respect, trust, and care. They shared stories, laughter, and quiet moments of reflection. He never treated her as someone in need of pity. He saw her as a person of strength, intelligence, and resilience. In return, she had learned to trust, to accept kindness without shame, and to embrace the connection they shared. One day, she decided to take her newfound confidence further by reaching out to others in her community who faced challenges. Inspired by her own journey, she began visiting families who had members with disabilities or those struggling with hardship. She offered encouragement, shared practical advice, and simply listened with empathy. Her words carried the weight of experience and understanding, giving hope to those who had felt isolated or helpless. The ranchero supported her efforts, assisting with travel, supplies, and guidance, but she led these interactions with her own voice and wisdom. Her influence soon spread beyond her immediate circle. The local community began to see her not as a woman defined by her paralysis, but as a symbol of perseverance, courage, and transformation. People approached her for advice, for stories of resilience, or simply to spend time in her company. The walls of isolation that had once confined her life gradually dissolved, replaced by a network of genuine human connection and appreciation. She realized that her struggles, once so painful, had become a source of strength that could inspire and uplift others. The children, now older and more confident, took pride in their mother's accomplishments. They helped with her community visits, learning the value of empathy, compassion, and action. Together, they created a small but significant circle of support for others, a ripple effect of the care and guidance she had received. In teaching and helping others, she found a renewed sense of purpose and fulfillment. Her life, once defined by limitation, was now defined by contribution, influence, and connection. The ranchero also encouraged her to continue learning and exploring new activities. With his support, she tried painting and crafts, discovering talents she had never considered. Each creative endeavor was a celebration of her independence and imagination, reinforcing the idea that her life could be full and meaningful, regardless of physical limitations. The process of learning and creating brought joy not only to her, but to her children and the community, as they admired and shared in her accomplishments. Social gatherings, once a source of fear and hesitation, became occasions of empowerment. She attended community events, shared meals, and participated in conversations, confident in her ability to contribute meaningfully. The ranchero's presence remained, but she no longer relied on him for courage. She had found it within herself. Her independence, combined with the support network she had cultivated, allowed her to engage fully and openly, proving that resilience and determination could overcome barriers of physical limitation and social expectation. Her home had become a center of activity and inspiration. Neighbors, once hesitant or indifferent, now sought her guidance and companionship. Families facing challenges came to her for advice and encouragement, learning from her experiences. The garden she had nurtured continued to flourish, providing food, beauty, and a tangible symbol of growth and possibility. Each day, she celebrated small victories: the bloom of a flower, a meal shared with neighbors, a letter of gratitude from someone she had helped. These moments, accumulated over time, brought a sense of fulfillment and joy that had once seemed impossible. Through all of this, her relationship with the ranchero evolved into something deeper than friendship. They shared a quiet understanding, a bond rooted in respect, trust, and shared experiences. He continued to assist when needed, but more importantly, he celebrated her independence, encouraged her endeavors, and provided emotional support. Their connection became a source of strength and joy for both, a reminder that genuine human relationships could flourish even in the face of adversity. One afternoon, she hosted a small gathering in her home, inviting neighbors and friends she had helped over the months. The house, once quiet and somber, was now filled with laughter, conversation, and warmth. She shared stories of her journey, from the despair of paralysis and abandonment to the hope and transformation she had experienced. The attendees listened with admiration, inspired by her resilience and the courage she had shown. The ranchero stood quietly beside her, proud of the woman she had become and the positive impact she was making in the community. As the evening progressed, she reflected on the path that had brought her here. The years of struggle, the isolation, and the pain had shaped her, but they had not defined her. Instead, they had revealed her inner strength, taught her the value of trust and compassion, and led her to connections that enriched her life. She understood now that hardship, when met with courage and support, could be transformed into growth, wisdom, and opportunity. Her children, watching her interact with the guests, felt a deep sense of pride and love. They saw the woman who had once been trapped by circumstance now thriving, influencing, and inspiring others. They recognized the lessons she had imparted, not only about perseverance and resilience, but also about empathy, generosity, and the power of community. These lessons would stay with them for a lifetime, shaping the people they would become. The ranchero, too, found his life enriched by their journey together. He had come into her life to offer help and support, but in return, he had witnessed the transformation of a human spirit, the rekindling of hope, and the creation of meaningful change. Their bond, rooted in shared experience and mutual respect, had become a partnership of equals, each drawing strength and inspiration from the other. In the following months, her influence continued to expand. She began organizing small workshops for women in her community, sharing skills in gardening, home management, and creative crafts. She spoke openly about the challenges she had faced and the strategies she had developed to maintain independence and dignity. These workshops became gatherings of learning, support, and encouragement, creating a network of empowered individuals who could uplift one another. The impact of her story extended far beyond her own household, touching the lives of many and fostering a culture of resilience and kindness. Through it all, she never forgot the early days of despair, the moments when isolation and pain had seemed insurmountable. Those memories, though painful, became a source of perspective and gratitude. She understood that the struggles she had endured had shaped her empathy, deepened her appreciation for kindness, and strengthened her determination to live fully. Her life, once constrained by tragedy, had blossomed into one of purpose, connection, and fulfillment. As the seasons changed, so did her confidence and vision for the future. She began exploring ways to advocate for others facing physical challenges, collaborating with local organizations to provide resources and support. She spoke at gatherings about resilience, independence, and the importance of compassion, sharing her personal journey as a beacon of hope. Each step she took in this direction reinforced her belief that life, no matter how difficult, could be transformed through courage, determination, and the support of caring individuals. The ranchero remained by her side, a constant reminder of the power of empathy and human connection. Together, they faced new challenges, celebrated achievements, and built a life filled with joy, purpose, and mutual respect. Their partnership, forged through shared experiences and trust, had become a source of stability and inspiration for themselves and those around them. In quiet moments, she reflected on the journey from abandonment and despair to empowerment and fulfillment. She understood now that life's obstacles, though formidable, could be overcome with resilience, courage, and the presence of those who genuinely care. She had learned to embrace support, cultivate independence, and find meaning in helping others. Her story had become one not only of personal triumph, but of inspiration for her community, a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit. As the sun set over the landscape, casting a warm glow across her flourishing garden and bustling home, she felt a profound sense of peace. The woman who had once been abandoned, isolated, and paralyzed was now vibrant, engaged, and purposeful. She had reclaimed her life, her dignity, and her hope. The ranchero stood beside her, a quiet smile reflecting the journey they had shared. Together, they had transformed hardship into growth, isolation into connection, and despair into hope. Her story, once defined by tragedy and abandonment, had become a tale of resilience, courage, and the transformative power of human kindness. She had learned that even after the darkest moments, life could bloom again, full of promise and possibility. And as the stars began to twinkle in the evening sky, she knew that her journey was not only a personal victory, but a source of inspiration for others, a reminder that hope, compassion, and determination could change the course of life forever.